In about 15 minutes, Matthias Meider, my colleague from Airbus Central ATO, will provide you with the Airbus recipe to make a fully competent captain. But before talking about the recipe, I would like to talk first about the ingredients. And we believe that the best ingredient to make a fully competent captain is to have first a competent pilot. The question is now, what is a competent pilot and how to train him, how to develop this competence. Now, there is a general consensus today, inherited from evidence-based training, to say that the competence of an airline pilot is made of 9 main elements. Chris killed me my startle effect, actually. Those main elements are core competencies, actually, and some of them are, let's say, mostly technical, such as the way we apply the procedures, the aircraft handling, something very important, the way we understand and manage the automation, and, let's say, the knowledge. But some of them, some others, are mostly non-technical, related to the crew, communication, leadership and team working, decision-making, situation awareness, and workload management. You have probably recognized here elements of crew resource management. Each of those core competencies can be characterized or described by a set of specific and observable performance indicators. If we take the example of communication, for instance, and this is, of course, the heritage, of course, of the evidence-based training concept, a good communication is characterized by this list of specific and observable performance indicators. Here you can see a good communication is, for instance, when the pilot conveys messages and information clearly, accurately, timely, and adequately. When the pilot listens actively, patiently, and demonstrates understanding when receiving information, etc. For Airbus, a competent pilot is someone who is able to regularly and adequately demonstrate many of the performance indicators, and the result, of course, is safe operations. And this is, of course, reflected in our grading system as a standard to be achieved. Therefore, the competence is the result of how many, how often, and how well the performance indicators are going to be demonstrated by the pilot. In the world today, the objective of any training is to develop the competence made of knowledge, skills, and attitude. And if we recognize that the pilot competence is made of the 9 core competencies, we have also to recognize that the primary objective of any pilot training, not only recurrent training, but any pilot training, should be the core competencies themselves, and not the task, not the events or the scenarios. The task, events, or scenarios, whatever the training, are just now vehicles, just tools to develop the core competencies. And this training approach will make our training more resilient by giving the ability to our pilots to face successfully any unexpected or untrained event, what we call, and what Chris said before, what we call a black swan. And of course, probably the most famous one is the uncontained engine failure of the Qantas Flight 32 in 2010. To develop those 9 core competencies, what we had till now we had till now, in fact, very limited training solutions. We had basically a type rating. I'm talking about Airbus, of course. We had a very limited training solution made of a type rating and a LIFUS. And in fact, those two modules were very technical, actually. In fact, we were playing on a piano with only 2 keys. This is why the Airbus Central ITO has decided to extend the initial training offer. We want to have a piano with more keys to make the music better, actually. So here is now our new piano, our new training solution. It is based on 9 modules, and each module aims at introducing specific and identified core competencies in a very specific context. We will have a new LIFUS module specifically dedicated to ab initio, to cadets. The dates are expected dates of entry into service. Advanced A, B, and C will constitute a modernized type rating that will be available very soon, and I can tell you, following the Chris presentation, that it will be, in fact, a 350 lookalike. So it will be the inheritage of the 350 training concept. Advanced A for the procedural knowledge acquisition. Advanced B for the basic, let's say, simple operations of the type rating. And Advanced C for more complex operations of the type rating. Before the type rating, we will have a brand new bridge made of 2 modules. Intermediate A aims at developing manual handling skill and situation awareness when flying at high altitude and high speed. For Intermediate B, it focuses mainly on the non-technical core competencies. Even more upstream, we will have 2 new reinforcement modules. Basic B dedicated to IFR reinforcement, targeting consequently manual handling and situation awareness when flying in IMC conditions. And Basic C enables, in fact, the transfer of handling abilities to a large, high-performance commercial aircraft. And finally, Basic A will be a foundation module, and it aims at introducing very progressively all the core competencies in a very simple context. In fact, this very long module, more than 35 sessions, has been essentially designed to meet the requirements of the MPL Phase 2. Again, behind the technical content, we have the core competencies. The training content in each module has been selected to develop the core competencies and not to tick boxes or to create training volume. And now, beyond the development of the competence, the main benefit for you is by gathering appropriate modules, we can meet now any training requirements as determined by the airline according to the trainee's background. We can now tailor the training according to your needs, and it becomes a real made-to-measure concept. Indeed, from different combinations, we can create now whatever you want. Of course, we can create a standard type rating with or without LIFUS. We can create a harmonized type rating MCC that includes a jet-oriented orientation course. We can create a reinforced type rating, and not only for cadets, but could be used for any pilot applicant. We can create MPL Phase 2 MPL Phase 3, and we can even create a full clean MPL curriculum with harmonized Phase 2, Phase 3, and Phase 4. To summarize, it's a very flexible concept, and again, not only for cadets. It is a full competency-based training based on the core competencies and not anymore on the tasks. It includes, as Chris said before, elements of evidence-based training, of course the use of core competencies as part of the grading system, but also the way we are going to select the events inside each module. It focuses, and it is something quite new, it focuses equally on technical and non-technical core competencies in order for this training to be resilient. We intend to use simple and practical models for human factors, crew resource management, and threat and error management. And it includes elements of upset prevention and recovery training in a wide range of situations all along the different modules. As far as possible, it will be compatible with MPL and ATPL, and it aims at being at least compliant with EASA and FAA regulations in accordance with the Central ATO philosophy strategy. We train for competence, but we want our training to meet your needs, to be effective, efficient, and resilient. And finally, the objective is for your first officers to become soon an excellent captain candidate. And for the second part, regarding the upgrade to command, I would like to now hand over the microphone to Matthias Meder. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matthias Meder. I have the pleasure to introduce the Airbus Command Course to you today. We have heard already during the past couple of days a lot about training competencies, training offers. Eric just mentioned in his presentation the competencies we discuss. And I'd like to share first, before I start with the presentation, what is key is that what I will present is part of our global offer as Airbus. It's part of what basically has been introduced just a few minutes back by Eric. And obviously, it is focused on competencies of pilots. So actually, this concludes my presentation. Thank you. We go in more details, certainly, but I'd like to make sure that captain's training does not start with a command course. I think the captain's training starts with the very first day of the pilot's career. So all what we do as an airline, as training organization, is already linked towards command training. So let's have a look on why in Airbus did we develop a command course. We have heard the numbers already from Susanna 2 days back. We expect above 200,000 new Airbus pilots to be trained in the next 20 years. And I leave it to you in terms of imagination how many captains this will be. I'm sure it's certainly a huge amount of new captains to be trained within the next couple of years. And one of the major questions, and you will see this word will come back and back in my presentation, is what do we do? How do we share our experience? How can we share your experience to the next generation of pilots? And that was a key message as well reinforced during the presentation from Eric on how can we reinforce the importance of competencies, pilot competencies. So actually this Airbus Command Course certainly aims in order to increase the competencies at a higher level of the pilots in being a commander. But we talked a lot of competencies, not only today, even during the last few days. Let's have a quick look on where are we with these competencies. I think we addressed a lot in terms of application of procedures. I think we have something very good in place in order how to tackle this. We have many things in place for the communication part of it. Same for flight path management, automation and manual. Although in manual we know we have put work in place in order to reinforce the manual flying skills. I think that was part of the presentation we heard during the last couple of days as well. Into knowledge, if we look into knowledge, that's well addressed as well. Same as leadership and teamwork. Actually, if I look at the last three ones, problem-solving, decision-making, situational awareness and workload management, this is something where we decided to look in more details. And this is what I would like to share with you today as one of the main key messages of the presentation. Let's look all together into this specific three areas of competence. By the way, those competencies are exactly the same competencies we use in the command course. We grow competencies through the command course, and we looked at and say, is there any different competence for a commander? And finally we concluded, no. Those are the basic 9 competencies which are part already of the grading system used and introduced even during presentations today. Now, if we look into this in a little bit more detail, a quick look into our footprint. I don't want to bore you with this and going through in details on all the different what we do. I'd like to highlight a few items on this in some more details. The first one is what is key is the selection process, and this is something to be done at the operator level to make sure that all those candidates for command training are at a good level when they go on the command course. Because as I mentioned already, the command course is the final part, is the fine-tuning part of an experienced first officer to become a captain. We have a home study, we have ground school phase, a handling phase, which includes as well loft sessions. We added actually a safety handling awareness session, which is basically a session addressing a captain flying with the first officer, and we put very similar to an instructor flight instructor familiarization session in the simulator. We do base patterns, and we put the new captain into a situation where she or he might be forced to take over, especially exercises in landing and takeoff. We have a command check, and obviously our course addresses as well the IOE phase, the flying part of it. So it's a complete approach to all phases of the command training. Let's zoom in a bit more in detail on the ground phase. And in the ground phase, we see basically we are addressing 8 days. And days number 1, 2, and 3 are dedicated to what we call in Airbus the command essentials. Now let's look a little bit more into command essentials, and we will see here the competencies addressed previously. So we look for core competencies, airmanship. We look into problem-solving, decision-making, leadership, and the role of the captain. Those are the main items in those days 1, 2, and 3, which we in Airbus call the command essentials. Now look further, and this is an area I would like to address with you this afternoon in terms of decision-making. And for this, actually, I like to come to a presentation which has been done by Dave a few weeks back during the Airbus Safety Conference in Bangkok. And many thanks at this stage, Dave, for lending me some of your slides, I think which are of a good use here to present. And actually, in Airbus we decided that we need to work into how do we make decisions. We know about poor decisions, their impact on incidents and accidents. We know about good decisions, which can prevent those incidents and accidents. And this, what we call the command essentials, the work which we spend, this is part of our Airbus command course. A large part of this is certainly decision making, and I'd like to share with you some interesting discoveries we made. The key point as well is that this course is made from pilots, for pilots, and we do not use abbreviations. And in a few minutes you will find out why I'm saying this. So let's start an exercise all together. So you have 10 seconds to pick up a cake. Okay, you done your decision? So how did you decide? First question is, any one of you, please raise your hand who is using any of those acronyms to make the decision. Okay, I conclude I haven't seen any. So now the question you allow me to address is, so how do we train then for decision making? Let's go in some more details on decision making models which we use, which we can use, and have a look at them specifically and see whether you have used them making your decision or not. So the first one we can talk about is trial and error. So question, anyone used trial and error to make the decision? Please raise your hand. Wolfgang, so can you explain, please? Okay, so I think the minority of in the audience didn't use trial and error. Let's have a quick look on what resources do we require to make a trial and error. It takes a lot of time. And if we ask ourselves the question, is it useful to crew in terms of decision making, we come up most probably with the answer no, except in training. This is something we can enforce, and we heard Chris about talking a bit on the 350. Let's have a next look. Another decision-making method we are using is analytic. So any one of you used the analytic method in order to come up with a decision? Please raise your hand. Okay, we have 1, 3. Good. Actually, what kind of resource do we need? We need data, a lot of data, and we need time. And is it useful for us as crew? Probably no, because of potentially missing time. Then the next one is we can make a balance sheet. Any one of you used a balance sheet? None. So what does it take? It takes time. And is it usable for us in the cockpit? No. Maybe if we have a lot of time remaining to make our decision. Then anyone flip the coin to make the decision? We have Dave, okay? And Jean-Michel. So the rest, nobody used the coin. So actually, what is the resources we need? It's a coin. Is it applicable to us as crew? No. I would say it's certainly a no. Let's have a look at the last 4. Anyone used the repeat decision-making method? Oh, I can't see. Please raise your hand if you used it. So I see 1, 2, 3. Okay. What kind of resources do we need? We need experience. And is it useful to us as a crew? Yeah, maybe. The next one is satisficing. So actually, what does it mean? Satisficing basically means we go for the first option, which meets our criteria, rather than going for the optimal. Anyone used satisficing to come up with a decision on the cakes? 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. What kind of resources do we need? Reduced resources, yes, because we go for the first option rather than for the optimum option. And useful to crew, certainly yes. That's certainly a decision-making model we can use. The next one is pattern matching. Anyone used this decision-making model, pattern matching? Please raise your hand. We have 1, 2. What does it need? It needs resources. Useful to crew? Yes, it is. So last but not least, our intuition, our gut feeling. So anybody used intuition, gut feeling? Yeah, okay, it's getting more, but it's still not the majority. So what do we need? Experience. Useful to us as crew, yes or no? Yeah. If you feel there's something wrong, most probably it's because something is wrong, but intuition can as well be misleading. So we need to know the limits of the intuition part. So for me to summarize, if we look at all the decision-making models, the 8 ones, and we look at the last 4, those are mainly ones which we consider, if we look at the column useful to crew, which have some use to crews which can be used. But what the most of them require in terms of resource, and that's my key message I like to share with you, is experience. So all of those decision-making models require experience. And now, if we look back, how many captains do we have to train? And if we look of how much time do we have in order to have first officers gaining this experience to become captains? Now, so what are the conclusions we can draw? The first conclusion is, actually I didn't ask who chose the chocolate cake, but something I assumed, pilots like chocolate cake. Actually, for me, the real question is not why, but how did you make the decision? And you still not convinced me that you used, or the majority really used, one of the decision-making models which were on the previous slide. So I think we all agree that decision-making is very important in aviation. Question is, can we train for better decision-making? And at Airbus, we decided to find out. So we did a couple of workshops to help us to decide. And if I look at the summary of what was on the screens before, what we call in terms of decision-making models, the first 3 we call they are the rational decision-making models. The flippism we take a bit out. And what we call the last ones, the last 4, they are the naturalistic decision-making models. And then actually we looked at how do we teach, and you see it's a repeat of the question I asked after I asked you to make a decision. So there's a lot of acronyms, and most of them, they have one key letter inside, which is the D, which I guess in most cases stands for decision. So the question is, but how do we really do the decision part of it? So actually, what do pilots use? And I've seen more or less all of them. Except none of you used any of the structures decision-making models. And if we have time in the cockpit, we might even use the rational ones. Yeah, but what do we do if we have to make a decision, if we have to come up in a time-critical and a safety-critical decision? Actually, none of them specifically. And that's what I would like to share as a key message. What we really use as human beings, as well as pilots, therefore, is recognition-primed decision-making. So therefore, experienced, and you see experience comes back in here, experienced individual, they recognize a situation. That's what we call the expert. They have seen or heard of something very similar before. By using this experience, they are very quick in knowing what to do, in evaluating, and then they do it. So that's the way actually we come up with decisions. Therefore, an expert does not compare different strategies or use rational methods or abbreviations. So the main question now is, and this is how I would like to close the loop into the command course, is can we train this? And we came up with the answer yes. And we do not need even a full flight simulator to do this. First of all, knowing about the different methods will open your eyes. And I hope this is something I achieved today with this presentation. Furthermore, by showing your own limitations for decision making, we explain, we train, and we observe recognized primed decision making is essential. And we need to practice and experience this. But again, it's all about experience and learning from experiences. And the key message is one of the most important lessons actually to learn is not to force people to use another method, and the rational methods, they will not work. And therefore, if you try to use them, it destroys the experience-based solutions. Therefore, in the Airbus command course, what we did is, I talked about the research we did at Airbus, and we have taken the results from this research into account when we developed the Airbus command course. So what I just present is part and included in the Airbus command course. Those command essentials, and this is why I shared them with you as one of the key elements of the command course, it's where we start the ground phase. And I think it's needless to say that we take those command essentials throughout the whole command course. We have dedicated exercises in order to share experience. We use, and Eric talked about this in his presentation, we continue to use the Airbus competency-based grading system. A quick note concerning the regulation, it's designed in accordance with the EASA AEROPS rules. And it's not only customizable, for me I like to say even further, it has to be customized to airline leads in order to address your specific airline needs. The command course is available on all Airbus aircraft types, and we have trained the first crews using this command course. Therefore, for me to conclude, it's adaptable to each airline. It's conducted by Airbus on behalf of the airline, and the last one, and this is really something, again, to reinforce even during the conclusion, it's about to ensure pilot competencies. And in this presentation, we addressed only a small part of it in the command course, highlighting the command essentials, talking about the decision making. And this is the way we believe that taking the command essentials throughout the whole command course will help sharing experience and grow the pilot competencies. Thank you.